Hello everybody, this is Manny from the 4 Isaac Academia, and today I'll be talking to you about One Piece theory, the total eclipse theory. I'll be talking to you about how Nostradamus helped me get to this point, a pattern that I've seen Order do but I'm yet to see anybody else talk about, past historical events that may help us inform on Order's intention, Order's use of kanji and how it ties in the whole theory together, and also I'll be talking to you about some cool science stuff, so stick around. Okay, I almost forgot the most important part. The One Piece or the Great War will be found or started in 10 days because that's when the eclipse will happen. And this video is pretty much going to explain how, and why. But yeah, let's go for real this time. During my recent reread of One Piece, I came across Oda's author notes in volume 9. He mentions that Nostradamus' prediction of when the world will end by the hands of a king. This eventually led me down a rabbit hole that ended with me attempting to answer, if Roger was too early, when is it the right time? In the author notes, Oda mentions that Nostradamus predicted the destruction of the world. Nostradamus' prediction roughly translated to the following. From the sky will come the great king of terror. He will bring to life the great king of the Mongols. Before and after, war reigns. These three lines have been interpreted with the following. This event will cause great terror and come from the sky. Its effect is to revive or bring to prominence an empire or kingdom in the east. War will be underway before and after. Breaking down the first line, from the sky will come the great king of terror. Based on Mandem Shirley's prediction, Luffy will destroy Fishman Island. This prediction falls in line with the theory that Luffy will eventually destroy the Grand Line and Marijoa. And Marijoa, being directly above Fishman Island, is the impending destruction of Fishman Island just a collateral from the destruction of Marijoa or the Grand Line? Will Luffy become the great terror from the sky? The second line states, he will bring to life the great king of the Mongols, possibly meaning the revival of an empire in the east, where Mongolia is. Is this because Laftel and the great kingdom is in the East Blue and will somehow be revived by the terror from the sky? Or does the prediction simply just mean that the king will come from the east the same way Roger did, i.e. Luffy? The final line being, before and after, war reigns happily. This indicating that wars will be fought before and after this event, but maybe for different reasons. As Whitebeard suggested during Marineford, once the One Piece gets found, a great war will happen. While many first speculated that Nostradamus' prediction was about an individual, people later came to believe that his prediction of the end of the world was actually a prediction for, you guessed it, a total solar eclipse. The king of terror in the sky is the eclipse itself. The sun and the moon rise from the east before creating an eclipse. And just like many mythologies suggest, the eclipse is a sign for the end of the world or the cause of wars. A solar eclipse occurs when a portion of the earth is engulfed in a shadow cast by the moon, which fully or partially blocks sunlight. This occurs when the sun, moon and earth are aligned. Such alignment coincides with the new moon, indicating the moon is closest to the ecliptic plane. The ecliptic plane being the plane of Earth's orbit around the sun. Okay, I'm just here to explain that part just a little bit further instead of just using words from Google. So the ecliptic plane. Yuck. The ecliptic plane, apologize, is the plane that the planets orbit around the sun. So you have the sun in the middle and you have all these planets going around it. Obviously, as everybody knows, every planet orbits around the sun. But however, our moon doesn't orbit around the sun. Our moon orbits around us. Well, we orbit around the sun. So when all of that comes together is when the moon essentially gets into the line of vision of the sun, and that's pretty much what I just tried to explain there. But I hope this explanation makes things a bit easier. I hope. The total solar eclipse has been looked at as several different things throughout history and mythology, but often is a cause of world-changing events and possibly the end of the world. Norse mythology believed that total solar eclipse signifies two celestial wolves who go by the name of Skull and Haiti, and they catch up to their prey, the sun and moon, swallowing them whole. Not only will it cause the sky and earth to darken and also collapse, but it will also indicate the beginning of Ragnarok, the downfall of the cosmos. So the reason why I decided to pick up this particular mythology to add to this video is because I feel like Skull and Haiti are the representations of Luffy and Blackbeard. Luffy and Blackbeard both chasing that One Piece. Blackbeard's Yomi Yomi no Mi shows that he's the representation of the sun. Luffy's Gomu Gomu no Mi which has been used or shown to be used as a big ball of fire. He represents the person chasing, or the celestial chasing the sun in this regard. And he also rides the 1000 Sunny, which I think, again, hammers down the indication that he's supposed to represent the celestial chasing the sun. The pursuit will eventually result in the collapse of the world until one comes out triumphant. And this will cause the downfall of the cosmos, i.e. the celestials, the celestial dragons, and the beginning of a new time. So I'm not going to list all the different mythologies that I found about the eclipse, but one thing that I found that a lot of them had in common was that, or they had a lot of suspicions, a lot of mythologies that believed that the sun was being devoured by a celestial being. And later on down this video, you'll see me talk about the connection between feasting, eating, and an eclipse. But yeah, that'll be a bit later down the video because it just doesn't fit here. But yeah, back. I wouldn't even lie to you. This sun is beating my ass. Fucking hell, mate. We have established that an eclipse involves sun, moon, and earth. One Piece is filled with symbolism and representations of the sun and moon. Shandora's connection with the sun, sun god Nika, Elbaf's celebration of the rebirth of the sun, the names of the major families in Wano, many different types of moon, Wano being a replica of Japan, the land of the rising sun, so on and so forth. So many people have talked about the significance of the sun and moon, the sun versus the moon, so I won't spend too much time on here, as there are others who have explained it in depth. However, I will point out some of the significant findings of the moon and sun that I've come across that I'm yet to see mentioned. So there are 3 things that I found that Oda seems to do at the end of almost every saga. And I'll talk about almost instead of all of them in a second. So the 3 things is that 1, Luffy defeats his villain in the sun. Like the sun is out and showing, so on and so forth. 2, we'll get a panel or panels of the sun or sunlight being blocked either fully or partially by something after the defeat, and I think this indicates an eclipse because that's what happens in an eclipse. The sun is blocked out. And 3, we will get a panel either a few chapters later of the crew celebrating underneath a moon. Again, another link between an eclipse and eating, and this pattern has shown throughout One Piece, and I'll just talk a little bit about which sagas it showed up in and why it doesn't show up in other sagas. Luffy defeats Arlong, and then we are presented with a panel of Luffy standing in front of the sun, with the sun peeking just behind his back. Yes, it could easily be a stylistic choice by Oda, symbolizing Luffy's triumph, showing the epicness of it all, and how he stands in victory. However, I believe there's more meaning to that. A chapter or 2 later, we see them lot celebrating Arlong's defeat and their liberation underneath a waning moon. When Luffy defeats Crocodile and sends him flying to the sky, the sun is showing, but suddenly clouds are formed and it starts raining. The sun is no longer visible and is blocked by the clouds. A few chapters later, we see a waxing gibbous moon on the night they celebrate Crocodile's defeat by feasting together. Luffy defeats Eneru in the sky. Luffy's shadow is seen in Jaya because he's blocking the sunlight, and when they celebrate Eneru's defeat, we see a half moon. The same formula is not used in the saga, and I'll get into why in a bit. However, after Rob Lucci gets defeated, the first thing we see in the cover page of the next chapter is Eneru's story and him making his way to the moon. Luffy defeats Gecko while dawn is creeping up. We see a panel of the sunlight being blocked before rising and slowly evaporating those who had their shadows taken by Gecko before he releases them. And we also see a full moon a few chapters later during Brooks' flashback. None here, but I'll get to why in a bit. This was a bit more complicated, as the final antagonist, Hordy, was fought underwater. Perhaps I missed the moon in the story after the fight, but we do get a similar trend of the antagonist being defeated and sunlight being blocked, in this case because of Noah. After Dorothy is defeated, dark clouds are seen above the cage, blocking the sun. It's easy to tell in the anime more so than in the manga. Then a few chapters later, above the cabin the Straw Hats and Sabo are in, we see a waning moon. To go back to Water 7, Paramount War, and possibly Whole Cake Island, even though it's not its own saga, but I feel like it's worth to mention, none of these follow the same trend, and this is because during those sagas, it was never going to result in the liberation of the people on that island. Defeat of Arlong liberated the islands around Arlong Park. Crocodile's defeat liberated the people of Alabasta, Eneru, Sky Island, Doffy, Dressrosa, etc, etc. Defeat of CP9 does not liberate Water 7 or Ennis Lobby. The former was not oppressed by the government the way Arlong, Crocodile, and so on oppressed the people on the islands that the Straw Hats visited, and Ennis Lobby is a government's island. If the Marines were defeated during the Paramount War saga, it would have been irrelevant. It wasn't the Straw Hats' fight, it was Whitebeard's. Luffy just managed to tag along. Luffy defeating Katakuri and Whole Cake Island does not free the people underneath Big Mom. There are no new beginnings in those islands in the same way there were in the islands I mentioned prior. Fishman Island to a less extent, maybe that's why I didn't find no moon symbolism within it. Also, at the end of the Water 7 saga, at the end of the Paramount War saga, at the end of Whole Cake Island arc, there was no big party at the end. And that is no coincidence. So just to summarize, in the saga where people's liberation and freedom are at stake, and Luffy defeats the antagonist of that saga, which result in their liberation, there is also foreshadowing or symbolism of a total eclipse, and there will be a feast between the people of that island or country underneath a moon. So just to summarize a bit further, the pattern goes something like this. Villain oppresses people in the country or island. Villain gets defeated. Foreshadowing of an eclipse. Feast for all. New beginnings on that island. I believe this to be just on the smaller scale of things that are going to happen or is going to happen, and that we will get the same pattern towards the end of the story in a way which liberates the whole world, essentially. While going deeper into this rabbit hole, I found something interesting regarding an eclipse and Luffy's favourite thing, eating. I think a lot of us have accepted or come to believe that Luffy's ultimate dream is a simple childlike one to have a party the same way he does at the end of every arc. What do you do during a party that the Straw Hats throw? You feast, you eat. Now, in no way, shape or form do I believe what I'm about to say to be a coincidence. The kanji for eating or feasting shares the same kanji as an eclipse. I don't believe that is coincidental, that the constant and blatant foreshadowing of a solar eclipse during every battle that results in the liberation of an island or country happens to share the same kanji as to what Luffy loves the most, and does with everybody at the end of every saga where the island is liberated. The foreshadowing of a solar eclipse aligns with a feast after liberating an island and the start of a new beginning. Earlier I mentioned the different moon phases that we see after the defeat of an antagonist. There are 8 different phases a moon goes through: a full moon, a waning gibbous, third quarter, waning crescent, new moon, waxing crescent, first quarter, and waxing gibbous. A new moon represents the start of a new lunar cycle. It symbolizes new beginnings. In the story so far, we can account for at least 6 of these phases. We're yet to see a waxing crescent or a new moon. If you look at this image, you notice that the waxing crescent appears after the new moon. However, this is how the cycle works in the real world. Based on what the moon phases appeared on in One Piece, we can safely say that the phases in One Piece are backwards. Chapter 28, Waning Crescent, Chapter 95, Third Quarter, Chapter 107, Waning Gibbous, Chapter 152, Full Moon, Chapter 162, Waxing Gibbous, Chapter 253, First Quarter, and I believe the next time that we see a moon from there is Chapter 334, where we see a third quarter, completely skipping waxing crescent and new moon. Like I said, we are yet to see a waxing crescent in the sky. However, we see a waxing crescent often enough in Wano on the clothes of Oden and the Night Scabbards. If the Kozuki clan or Wano is a representative of the waxing crescent, that means we are currently in the final phase of the moon before we get a new moon. Now, there are 2 significances of a new moon. One, it is dawn. Dawn happens every day, but dawn after a new moon is more significant as it informs a new beginning in 2 ways: daybreak and new lunar cycle. 2, a total solar eclipse can only occur during a new moon when the moon passes between Earth and the sun. If we remind ourselves of the beginning of Toki's prophecy, you are the moon unaware of the dawn. May your purpose be fulfilled. Although we see many phases of the moon, a new moon is the only phase that can be aware of the dawn as it passes through Earth in between the sun. However, that is not enough. A new moon during a solar eclipse is the only time Earth, moon and sun are aligned, thus making itself aware of the sun as they are both aligned to each other, and also making itself aware of daybreak, therefore being aware of the dawn. A solar eclipse is not as rare as I thought. It occurs once every 18 months. However, for a total solar eclipse to appear in the same place, it only happens once every 400 years. Oda doesn't often mention dates and years in One Piece, but there are 2 times that it does, which I feel are extremely important to this theory. Nolan's flashback 400 years ago and Sanji's birthday during a recent Viva card. I want to check which years a solar eclipse has happened to coincide with the year that we are in. Based on Nolan being around 400 years prior in 1122, we could potentially be in the year 1522. I'm not ignoring the time skip, where some would suggest that we're either in the year 1524 or 1525. The manga doesn't say it was 400 years to the date, and for my own selfish and personal headcanon, as One Piece theorists need to do, I think it's highly possible that 1522 was always the year that One Piece was intended to end. But entertain me and say that you agree. In a recent Viva card, Oda announced that the day before Sanji and Ko arrived at Wano, it was Sanji's birthday. Sanji's birthday is on the 2nd of March, and shortly after his arrival, Wano skips 2 weeks ahead, making it the 17th of March. There was an eclipse in the year of 1522. Not only is that important now, but it also highlights why Oda decided to give us an important story in Skypiea that happened 400 years prior, possibly nodding towards the fact that the eclipse only happens in the same place every 400 years. Not only that, Nolan's flashback showed us many parallels between Roger and Nolan. Many others have picked up on this fact, specifically O'Hara, where he mentioned that they were both powerful, free-spirited adventurers, both had the voices of all things, both went to legendary places, Shandora and Laughdale, and both were sentenced to death the same way. One of them was too early, while the other one would have been too late. We are now aware of the year that an eclipse took place. Now let's take a look at Oda informing us of the date that we are currently in and why he didn't do it for the sake of it. It's clear that he wanted us to know that March 17th specifically is the date that we are currently in. This is important because not only was the date of the eclipse in the year 1522, it also happened in the month of March. To be precise, March 27th, 10 days from now in the story. During the 1522 solar eclipse, it was only a small area in Russia who came to be known as Alden, a gold mining town who was found after the discovery of rich gold deposits that was able to see the total eclipse for all its glory. An irrelevant detail for this theory, it's not like we know a character that would have been Russian in the real world that is looking to discover the mystery of the One Piece and the mystery of history that will take place underneath a solar eclipse. Do you know anyone? But that is not the interesting part. The interesting part is what the people of Japan would have seen during that eclipse. Now, thanks to this website, astro.ukho.gov.uk, we can see exactly what the people of Japan would have seen. A partial eclipse that looks like a waxing crescent, similar to the one worn by Odin and his retainer, but what do I know? It's not like Oda ever used past historical events to tell the story of One Piece. Ever. If you're still here, thank you very much. And before I get into the last 2 points that I have for this theory is, if you like this video, give it a like, give us a subscribe, drop a comment if you want, follow us on socials, at us to carry on this conversation if you really want to. Yeah, let's just keep it going. So the last 2 things that I want to talk about, the first one pertains Shirayoshi and Momonosuke. We can be sure that Shirayoshi is one of the sovereigns that the Sea Kings were talking about during Oda's flashback. And the quote was something along the lines of, they're waiting for the day that 2 sovereigns meet. Now, there's a theory out there that Momonosuke may be the other sovereign, and that Momonosuke is the reincarnation of Uranus. There's a theory out there about Momonosuke being Uranus, even the way that his haircut is shaped or his head, or whatever, so on and so forth. He may be Uranus. There's a video or something out there that you can go quickly find and read up on it. But entertain me for a bit and say that Momonosuke is Uranus. Momonosuke, being from Wano and everything that we talked about previously in this video, would be the representation or the representative of the moon. While Shirayoshi from Fishman Island, where the sun pirates come from, with the sun symbol, she will be the representation of the sun. And as you well know, when the sun and the moon eventually come together, it will cause an eclipse. When the sun and moon align, it will cause an eclipse. So that's the day that the Sea Kings are waiting for. They're waiting for the 2 sovereigns to meet. But it's not just about the 2 individuals. It's not just about Poseidon. or Uranus or Poseidon or whatever ancient weapon meet together. It's also about the sun and the moon eventually aligning together in a particular place to cause an eclipse, and that is what they're waiting for. So finally, the last thing that I want to bring up before I end the video, wait, this quick disclaimer before I do. I can't speak or read Japanese, so anytime I've translated kanji or Japanese words to add to this theory, I've been using Google. So if the translations are anyway bit off, go speak to Google about that. It's got nothing to do with me. One thing that I'm sure of is that there's things called radical in kanji, and apparently the radical is a term to refer to the building blocks of kanji. So there's 214 radicals within kanji, and each radical represents things. So radical 72 represents the sun, while radical 74 represents the moon. And the radical that brings them all together, or brings those two together, is radical 73, obviously, which essentially represents say. But that's not the only thing it represents. So radical 72 represents sun, radical 74 represents moon. And the thing right in between them, radical 73, also represents history. Thank you if you enjoyed this video. Please like it, subscribe, leave a comment, and let me know your thoughts. One Piece は実在する